What's going on, everybody? We are back. We are live, and we are a little late because I'm having some technical difficulties. As you can see, I'm on my phone. I'm not on my laptop. I'm your host, driver Bain, here for Driving Forward, filling in for Nate Johnson, who is off conquering the world, one shining sea at a time. I think somehow the computer gods decided this message was way too important and tried to stop us from having the show today, but no worries, we figured things out, and that's why we do it live. And it's going to be awesome. So I've got two incredible guests today. We're going to be talking about their journeys in basically in the transportation space, as well as their overall journey in cybersecurity and why cybersecurity matters for your organization as a brokerage, as a transportation provider, as a carrier, and then practical steps you can take to actually implement cybersecurity and help to prevent and mitigate fraud, theft, all the things that we're talking about that everyone says is rampant across logistics, and yet somehow we don't have ways to actually fix it. So we're going to talk about that today. So with that said, I'm going to bring in my two guests, Ben and Artie. Hey, there we go. What is going on, fellas? How are we doing today?
Oh, we're great. Thanks. Yeah, thank you very much for having us today.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, Artie, we're going to start with you because obviously, Ben, you and I have got a chance to know each other quite well. Artie, tell us who you are, where you're at physically, presently, a little bit of your background, and we'll kind of go from there.
Sure. So, physically located in wonderful Jensen Beach, Florida, a little artisan community just north of West Palm Beach. So we have a blast down here. Tiki huts are everywhere.
Wonderful. Awesome. And then what is your current role?
So my current role is the Director of Cybersecurity for the NMFTA, the National Motor Traffic or Freight Traffic Association, right? And in this role, most of this role is outreach, community access across the industry and across the sector. We do some internal cybersecurity. Mm-hmm. But for the most part, we are forward-facing for the organization in the cybersecurity realm.
Fantastic. And real quick, your background, because I know it is actually really interesting. We'll touch on that a little more later. But,
oh, thanks. So I'm a 27-year career Marine communicator. Thank you. I appreciate that. So I was a communicator my entire career. If you remember Good Morning Vietnam, I started with the little teletypes that were in the back, right, where the two big twins. So I started with that. It moved into computers. Networking. I've done networking 311 and NT40. So I go back a couple days in this business.
Sure.
As we graduated through, we realized that cyber was important. I think we probably called it 100 different terms until we finally settled on the sexy term that cybersecurity is the term that's going to get all the money, right? Before we even knew what it was, and then from there, kind of parlayed that across several different, Microsoft, some federal system integrators, still working for the government and in the intelligence community for the most part, but been doing the cybersecurity aspect of all of this for probably about 30 years. So I've got a couple days under my belt.
Fantastic. So you're from the government and you're actually here to help.
I'm actually here to help. Yes. I even got a tour at CISA where we actually did help.
Amazing. And then Ben, you and I've got a chance to know each other over the last, year or so. So we've been on some podcasts, doing some events. Same thing, kind of who you are, where you're from, a little bit of your background, and we'll jump into everything.
Sure. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. So I'm at the other eastern corner of the country. I'm up in Vermont. Tiki huts are few and far between up in this neck of the woods, but I am the cybersecurity principal engineer at NMFTA, so really supporting the same mission that Artie spoke to. We're focused on research and education, really outward facing for the transportation sector writ large. Best practices, current guidance, vulnerability researching on the hardware side of things as well internally here. So kind of do a lot of different go down a lot of different rabbit holes, and we sort of translate cybersecurity language into trucking language for the community. So awesome.
And I think I like that you mentioned that translate trucking language. I think that's where, one of the initial rubs when it comes to just technology and cybersecurity in general is these are two very different languages we're speaking when it comes to the ones and zeros, right? Can both of you kind of touch on this? I'll start with Ben. Just touch on kind of what led you into that, and then how have you been able to kind of translate this for others?
So my path into cybersecurity actually started behind the steering wheel of a truck. I've been in transportation my whole career, cybersecurity for the latter half of my career, and so having the opportunity to work through the transportation industry, from driver to dispatcher to operations support, IT infrastructure, that whole kind of saw the process from the front to the back, and then realized how porous the security side of it was. And that sort of directed my own interest into, well, what do I do as someone responsible for infrastructure and systems in a transportation company? What do I do to keep us safe? And how do I then also, educate my team, being the organization at large, on the importance of this and the relevance of this? Even though we're not in fintech, we're not a tech startup, we're not in finance, cybersecurity is important as a trucking company. And so that really prompted my journey into educating myself first, and then educating others on the importance of cybersecurity in the transportation industry.
Awesome. And Artie, kind of same thing. Obviously, with the military background, I'm sure saw quite a few holes in the communications and the security space. What led to focusing on transportation and everything in the logistics space?
So going across several different sectors, right? Whether that was, the utility sector or the healthcare sector, or, the DoD sector for that matter. When I got over to CISA and realized the holes that were actually in the transportation and the logistics sector, I thought, what a better way to take a set of knowledge that I have and a set of skills of translating these very technical things into non-technical things that people can relate to. But then I get assigned a translator that actually speaks truck, right? So on top of it, right, we can take all of these intelligence things, we can take all of these cybersecurity things, and we can really distill them down and support the industry. That is just amazing to have a mission, like this, and then have a partner in crime, with Ben, that allows us both to take and caveat on each other's strengths and help move the industry forward.
Awesome. I also love the irony of having a partner in crime when it comes to cybersecurity.
Right.
So you talked about already, Artie, some of your primary responsibilities. Then Ben, on your side, again, same thing. What are some of the primary responsibilities, and what are some of the initiatives? We're going to talk about that a lot here as we get going. What are some of the initiatives y'all are focused on right now, especially with fraud and theft being so rampant across the space?
Yeah, so I think the primary responsibility is really understanding the current landscape, both on a technical level and also kind of, I would say, cultural level in the transportation space as it relates to cybersecurity awareness, and sort of raising that baseline, and finding where the gaps are, but then also finding the tools to fill those gaps. And if those tools don't exist, when they do, we point people to other resources. Like we point people to CISA or TSA or resources that are out there. And when they don't exist, it's to really pull industry partners, whether it's federal partners in the government or state level government, and figure out ways to fill in those gaps with educational resources, guidance, best practices. So that's really the primary responsibility from where I sit. And that's what led us into our Roadmap to Resilience project that you and I talked about a lot at the Freight Fraud Symposium we were both at.
Yeah.
That was really our first large-scale project that Artie and I were both involved in here at NMFTA, where we sat back and said, okay, why is it that we are struggling as an industry with some of the same challenges over and over with our baseline cybersecurity awareness and preparedness?
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big part of that gap came from the fact that there's a lot of highly technical cybersecurity resources out there, but they're not really geared to trucking. They're not really geared to a non-security oriented, fast-paced industry where, speed and efficiency are the priorities. And there's this kind of misconception that security equals slowing us down, or security equals causing friction and making things more difficult. So it was really a matter of us trying to translate some of the cybersecurity guidances from your NIST standards, from the cybersecurity maturity controls, CIS 18, into language and into a framework that's approachable, digestible, and actually, I'm going to steal one of your words, Artie, the implementable for a trucking company with limited resources. They don't have a lot of money or necessarily staff to throw at this. So that's really been our big push over the last this past year, and it directly relates to the same issues we're seeing with the cyber-enabled cargo crime. It's a lot of the same attack vectors, and so that's where that crossover that you mentioned really occurs.
That and already implementable. It's like we talked about this too, Ben. Was like, how does this get adopted? Right? How does it actually get into practice? How are seat level users actually impacting this? Because I don't think there's a single leader who does not want their network and their truck secure. But then when you get into the seat level individual who has to action on all this stuff on a daily basis multiple times, how does it get adopted and not feel like their job's being hindered? Can you talk about that a little bit, Artie, and kind of what you mean by implementable and how you kind of break that down?
Yeah, so what we try to do, and I think Ben will really attest to this well, is what we try to do is kind of remove the big scary words and the big scariness out of it, right? All of a sudden, when somebody hears the word cybersecurity, they think dollar signs. Yep. Oh my gosh, this is going to cost me large dollar signs to implement. And this is going to, and it's going to be a long-term project. And I don't really want to do it because I don't know if I have the staff or the people in order to do it. So what we've tried to do, and I think that this Road to Resilience set of guidance that we've put out. Okay.
I think he's coming back on the other device.
I think so.
Yeah, the laptop's trying to behave.
There? Okay.
I'm here.
So where I was headed with that is that so we've tried to distill that down to, hey, here's some real practical measures that don't cost a lot of money, and the return on investment is huge, right? Whether that's implementing multi-factor authentication or whether that's implementing network segmentation, which is they're small investments, right? User training, small investment, huge return. And I think by distilling these things down into bite-sized chunks, we've been able to get the industry, as far as that's concerned, to start implementing these. Then I think the second thing that we really did is we went out into the industry and said, look, quit keeping this information to yourself. It's not part of your P&L. It's not a secret sauce. Share your wins, share your losses, so that it's not going to damage or make your reputation better or worse, because it's not a win. It's not an if, it's a win. So you need to go ahead and start sharing the things that you did right, share the things that you did wrong, so that you can start to learn from each other's mistakes and their successes when it comes to implementing cybersecurity programs.
Well, I think, Artie, just to jump on what you just said, the destigmatizing the fact that you've been a victim as an organization, I think that's been huge. We've seen that at our conference. We had people there talking about that, having been a victim, and really trying to normalize that conversation and say, look, there's so many victims that don't get properly reported. There's so many times that a cyber attack will occur, and either a ransom gets paid or they restore from backup, but nobody's the wiser. Nobody shares that information, the lessons they learned necessarily, because of that fear of the reputational hit that they may receive from that misconception that it's somehow a bad thing that they were victimized. I think that's important.
Yeah. That's huge. Ben, we talked about that too, is that kind of, that scarlet letter of being a victim of theft. The reality is that, there's not an organization that's immune from anything like this. We've seen it where, a vendor of Microsoft took them down for how many hours, last year. And they're one of the largest and most secure organizations out there. And yet here they are, the entire platform is down.
Right. And that was just through not checking a patch.
Yep.
Very simple.
Yep.
It was as simple as that. And it took down a lot of Microsoft subscribers as well. Delta went down due to it. And a lot of high name businesses actually were involved in that outage.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
But thank goodness there was nothing nefarious. There was nothing, crazy. There was no cyber attack. It was just a misaligned patch.
But
now I don't want to downplay it either. They should have made, way more sure, right?
Right.
that it shouldn't have blown everything up.
Well, so let's talk about that. That you mentioned already, the dollar signs, the fear of kind of the unknown, the fear of the known. I mean, yeah, because of, I would say, trucking's overall lack of tech. Even though we've had a lot of investment in that, there's been a ton of digitization. We're still a very analog business as an overall industry, right? And so without that deep understanding, I think there is just an overall fear of like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. If everything's working, why would we try to look at it? So how do you, one, kind of address that culturally from an industry perspective? And then what are some best practices to actually test these things? So when you put new processes or a patch in place, it's not going to blow everything up.
Ben, why don't you go ahead and start and I'll dogpile? Because this
Sure.
Robert, this is one we could go on for a while on this.
Yeah, good open-ended question there. Well played,
right.
Sir. No, I think so. I'm going to pick that apart and address the kind of the cultural part of it first. And you hit the nail on the head. I mean, there's a lot of tech in trucking, but it's only adopted when it makes us faster, more efficient, or more profitable. Right?
Almost.
And I mean, that's kind of any industry, really. We're not going to adopt tech for the sake of tech. But the problem is with the digitization we've seen in transportation is the connection was the priority. The speed was the priority. The integration with your trading partners was the priority. Security has become a concern, but it's an afterthought. And so it often does require more investment than it would to do it securely in the first place, to go back and bolt security on. And it's more difficult as well. And so really the first step is shifting that paradigm and saying, look, we want to adopt technology into our organization. We want to keep up with the evolutions in the tech sector that are benefiting us, but we want to do it in a security aware way. We want to understand every time we add a new tool to our organization that makes us faster or connects us to another application or trading partner, we need to understand that is a potential to take on more and more risk, right? So the tool itself could present a risk. And so it's really understanding that cybersecurity isn't an extra expense. Cybersecurity is a business protection tool that you want to adopt, just like you adopt a safety program to, that costs money to educate your drivers on safety or educate your warehouse teams on safety. But it protects the business. It protects the investment you've made so far in your business. And really starting to look at cybersecurity in the same light as a safety program or a preventative maintenance program, for that matter, right? It is a cost. There's no getting around that. But it's a cost that enables you to stay in business and to stay profitable and stay efficient long term, rather than just short win.
Ben, I'd like to go back real quick and capitalize on the first part of that, because before we have this adoption in technology or this realization that cybersecurity is important, we have to dispel the myths that, well, I run old software that's not this just not, nobody's going to hack that, or my organization is too small, or there's a whole bunch of ors. You can put whatever set of words you want after each or.
It can't be me. mindset.
Right. And it truly is. And it's like, it won't be me. Right. And they're very adamant on the fact that because of this, because of that, or because of this other thing, right, I am not a target. And what we see now more than everything else, that it is truly not a case of if, it's a case of when, right? And it doesn't matter the operating systems, it doesn't matter the size, it doesn't matter any of those pieces of the puzzle that we once looked at as maybe, an opportunity to kind of not spend as much or not implement good cybersecurity hygiene. Now it's absolutely paramount that this good cybersecurity hygiene, just the hygiene portion, and this far exceeds the adoption of technology at that point, right? So it's just having the fact that, Mary in accounting can understand what a business email compromise is, or Jason out on the docks that has a scanner that's running Windows CE knows that that operating system is susceptible to everything that he's scanning, so that somebody can scrape that data off of that terminal. And it's just having that basic understanding to be aware, to look around your lots, right? Are there people on your lots that shouldn't be there? Are there people sitting in cars near your lots, that shouldn't be there? Because not that they're doing nefarious things. Of course, I've seen where some of these warehouses are located and they could be doing nefarious things. But for the most part, it's having this general awareness of what's going on. You got a dude sitting outside your office place with his laptop open. I got a feeling he's not emailing his wife. So there's probably something to be said for that. So secure your Wi-Fi networks. And these are just simple, basic IT steps that probably should be taken before. And I know we can jump on this, we can dogpile it, but then we start to get into that adoption of technology that Ben was talking about, and we're going to spend some dollars. We know that we don't have big percentage margins, in the trucking industry. Everybody's operating on less than 7 points for the most part. So they got to move a whole lot of freight in order to make any money.
Yep.
So how do we find that extra money? And I think we find that extra money by squirreling a little bit of it away each year for capital investments in cybersecurity. And each year that we're not hit by a ransomware attack or that we're not breached, then that can come back into our cybersecurity budgets, and we can start to make sure that we're more secure and do these, technology leaps that, Ben was talking about as we start to move forward in the industry.
Absolutely. I think that's so important to understand that, this is not a one-time, investment. This is going to be a continuous investment, because the bad guys are sophisticated. They are smart. These are not stupid people, that are out there trying to do this. Like, these are very, very intelligent individuals that have decided that this is the route they want to go. They could probably make good money in other legal venues, but they've decided this is the route they want to go. And so you have to stay ahead of them, or as best you can keep up with them. And that's where that investment comes from, that continued investment, right?
So yeah, absolutely, 100%. And to your point, Robert, I think that this is really, it accents your point, is some of these people moonlight as a criminal activity because their daytime job is actually doing it for real for an organization. So there's a lot of nuances. And like you said, there's a lot of smart people on the bad guy list as well. So, and of course the advent or the next level implementations of AI have made the cost of entry way lower, but that's a whole story for another segment on another day.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's a good segue for us. We're going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll come right back. We're going to talk about education and training and kind of overall awareness of cybersecurity. So we'll be right back.
If your fleet's downtime looks like chaos, you're missing out on GLCS. In the fast-paced world of trucking and logistics, time is everything. Meet GLCS, your expert partner in managed IT services. We integrate seamlessly with your team, bringing seasoned IT professionals with deep transportation and logistics expertise. Imagine your software updates running smoothly, complex issues resolved quickly, and operations humming with efficiency. GLCS has your back. Our support doesn't just fix problems, it prevents them. With our industry connections and proactive approach, we keep your trucks rolling and your brokers working. Think of us as the added resource your company needs to unleash its full potential. Visit glcs.net today and keep your business driving forward. GLCS, where efficiency meets expertise.
And we're back. I always love that freight movement commercial because the song is just super catchy, but I digress. So, Ben, starting with you, I'd like to talk about just overall training and awareness. I think training is a hot topic in general because Artie already mentioned it. There's that velocity of business. We want to make sure that we keep the trucks running, the volume's coming in, the loads are coming in. And I always think it from the brokerage perspective of, if you hire a new person, you want them on the floor making revenue and money as quickly as possible. And so sometimes one of the corners that gets cut is training, no different than on the cybersecurity side. So kind of talk about the importance of training and what organizations can do to kind of get some of those quick wins when it comes to that.
Yeah, so this is actually one of my favorite topics because for two reasons. Number one, it's the highest return on investment, bar none, in cybersecurity, as far as I'm concerned. Humans are perpetually considered the weakest link, but they're also your best asset when it comes to it's other than the strongest man in logistics, humans are the weak link. No, so it's really, I feel like that's a bit of an unfair statement because there's a comma there, and they're also your best asset because they're also the ones who can have that spidey sense to say something doesn't seem right here and pause and say, wait, we should look a little bit further. Maybe this isn't what it seems to be. Maybe this is phishing or something like that. But that only comes with training, and the training has to be, like you said, we're not going to give them 3 months off to go train on cybersecurity. Never happened. You'd be lucky to get 30 minutes to go train, right? So there's a couple of things that you need to consider when you're trying to design and implement a training program for your team. And it's got to be bite-sized. It's got to be small, digestible pieces that can be done regularly. What I don't like to see is when it's that annual checkbox. Oh, we got our anti-phishing training and I watched this video and I took the test and I passed. That's not cybersecurity awareness training. That can be a piece of it. But the real effective cyber awareness training is ongoing. It's tailored to the role that you sit in as an employee, right? Because if you're on a brokerage team, the training for you is going to be very different as maybe a carrier agent or a sales agent. It's going to be very different for you than it is for someone in HR or for someone in accounting or a maintenance team or a driver for that matter. We need to be, drivers need to be included in that, in tailored cybersecurity awareness training. So understanding how they interact with technology and understanding what threat actors they're going to be interacting with, right? So what types of attacks do they need to be looking for? So I think those are the two caveats that I always have for training: is make it bite-sized and make it tailored. Don't do once a year to get your compliance checkbox. Think of it the same way we do safety training. Safety training programs are everywhere in transportation. They're ongoing, they're constant, they're different modalities. Maybe you get a flyer posted in the break room. Maybe you get a small training nugget online that you review and then take a test. And, it could be a whole bunch of different ways, but it's constant. It's cultural in the organization. And the same approach needs to be taken for cyber awareness training as well.
I have a quick snippet if you don't mind me sharing, right? So I went to work with a carrier out in the Pacific Northwest, and they had just given, and I got to spend a day in the truck with the driver. So life was good, right? And I get to see what these drivers do on a day-to-day basis. And he's kind of picking my brain a little bit here and there. And he said he had just gotten done with his cyber awareness training, about 2 weeks before I showed up, right? It was first of the year, that was that. I was like, oh, that's great. So you kind of get all of this now. He's like, no, I'm scared to touch any link on my phone. I don't want to hit any button other than the numbers buttons to call my wife.
Yep.
And so, but we had to go through and talk about that a little bit. And I think this is strictly to Ben's point on all of this, right? Is make it tailored to fit the billet, make it tailored to, small nuggets, and make it right. It doesn't have to be scary to be right, but it does have to have impact. So I just thought it was kind of interesting that it was the first time. He's like, I wish I would have gotten this training, when I first got behind the wheel, because now we have ELDs. I have, since we're testing a new system, I have 2 ELDs. What if I make a mistake? What if somebody hacks this ELD? Now I'm thinking about all of this stuff all of the time. And I'm like, okay, take your tin hat off. It's okay, right? Come down just a little bit, right? The pressure's fine down here, but at first it can be very scary when you receive those.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, I think that's something that we want to be aware of too in the training is we don't want to run around being Chicken Little saying the sky's falling, right? Because you can't rely on scare tactics to induce behavioral change. We want to create vigilance, create awareness of the risks that are out there, but in a useful way, not in a, like scared to do anything kind of way. I think that's a really good point, Artie.
You want to empower people to say, hey, like these things are very real, but with the skills, with the things we're educating you on, you can fight them, you can prevent them. You are not powerless, you are not helpless at all in this fight. And we're better preparing you to be ready for those things.
Right. And
Absolutely.
I think additionally to Ben's point, right, if you're going to, do these trainings, right? So in the accounting or the accounts receivable section, maybe you should craft your trading emails to look like, hey, look, this is Martha from, GLCS. We know that we commonly use you guys to, to move our stuff from here and there. We've changed our routing and banking numbers. So please, forward, all accounts receivable and payments to this banking and routing number. She needs, or the accounting section needs to be trained to have a secondary verification methodology.
Yep.
Instead of just going through that and saying, oh yeah, I work with Martha all the time over at GLCS. Yeah, let's go ahead and change it. And we've seen several accounts several stories where now that account information comes back and, bank accounts have been drained. And that can be scary, but it could be trained out of, of people within the organization.
Absolutely.
Well, I think, sorry, go ahead, Robert.
Oh, go ahead.
No, so I just wanted to say that kind of brings us to another really important part of training. And I think that, we spend a lot of time talking about awareness training and preventative training. We also need to train for the what to do when portion, right? So we need to train for incident response. Mm-hmm. We need to train, practice our business continuity plans, our disaster recovery plans. We need to train those aspects. So it's the pre-event and the post-event training are both critical. And so, in that situation, it's like, okay, what if somebody changed routing information? Like, what's our response to that incident having occurred? Who do we contact? Who needs to be notified? How do we unwind this incident? So I think those are critical components of your training as well.
Absolutely. And I think, you look at the support of those things. It's actually one of the things I forwarded you guys earlier. When you look at like interagency collaboration, you look at like different folks, like, whether it's law enforcement or some of the agencies like the NMFTA or whoever, like how are you able to collaborate with those groups, whether it's pre-incident, post-incident, how are you able to collaborate with those folks to kind of put your best foot forward in a cybersecurity setup?
Very carefully.
Perfect.
No, and that's one of the things. And if you're okay, I'll go ahead and take this to start with. Right, one of the things that we looked at when we both came on board is how do we, expand the relationships, the private-public nonprofit relationships, right, collectively across the board. With me coming from CISA, still had quite a few contacts over at CISA, but it really wasn't enough, right? Ben cultivated some more relationships along the way. And what we've done, or what we've been able to do at NMFTA, is start to dissect and pull apart and figure out, especially in the complexities of cargo theft, right? Or cyber-enabled cargo theft, start to, pull apart who's responsible for what's the problem, where's the breakdown, how do we make this happen, more ambiguously and more seamlessly as we start to, who do they call, when do they call them, and for the general message, right? So pre-breach, and we'll call that, left of bang, right? You would call a CISA or a TSA, and they'll come in and help you kind of, evaluate your stuff. And NMFTA will even help you evaluate, your organization and how you align to some of your peers. But you have those type of agencies out there, and they truly are out there to help, right? And then post of bang or right of bang, right? Once the incident happens, you have agencies like the FBI, and you have U.S. Secret Service where crypto is involved, right? If somebody's locked you out with a crypto wallet or taken your money through crypto, the Secret Service has been very, very successful in recovering cryptocurrency, right? Or recovering the dollars that have been changed into cryptocurrency. So, and it's kind of also dispelling the myths that, oh my God, that's the FBI, I can't call the FBI. That's not necessarily true, because they're going to be the ones that have the most information on that particular bad actor. And in certain times, they may even have the encryption keys if your data was encrypted, right? Because they've worked around or with that bad actor enough. They just haven't had enough to put him in jail yet, which is unfortunate. But they know enough of the tools, tactics, and procedures. They know enough of that bad actor that they can unlock your systems for you and let you be back up and running much quicker. So those are the type of the things that we're focused on, is kind of getting that broad-based information set out there, right? And then within NMFTA, we're starting to set up these public-private nonprofit relationships with multiple agencies that typically haven't talked to each other in the past. Currently we're working with HSI, TSA, and CISA all together, which, okay, putting them in the same room and getting them to agree that the sky is blue when the sun is out is probably one of the hardest things there is to do. But in this particular case, we have a joint common mission fostered by a nonprofit being involved, and everybody's kind of, okay, it sounds like we want to do this. And then we're able to turn actionable data over to the FBI to make arrests. That's the fun part, because now we're actually seeing successes come out of combating cyber-enabled cargo crime.
Which that part is, I believe, huge. And Ben, we actually were talking about this in Dallas. That's one of the big concerns, is like, okay, great, an incident happens, and then you have your insurance, you have all the things that are there to support you. But like, what's the recourse? Like here in America, like, what do I want to see people go to jail when they do bad things, right? And so when we may not know who they are, we see bad things get done. and no one goes to jail, no one's really held responsible, just the bad guys, we feel helpless, right?
Yeah, that's the perpetual frustration in cybercrime in general. Is so much of it is coordinated from locations that are not friendly to wants and warrants. They're not going to assist in investigations, and they're certainly not going to extradite someone for prosecution. So we have to understand that it may not resolve to that outcome that we want to see, but it definitely won't if we don't include teams like the FBI or teams like U.S. Secret Service, right? If we just deal with the incident, we deal with our insurance company, we get back up and running, and then we don't want to talk about it because we got breached, we're definitely not going to get the outcome we want.
Absolutely.
But if we bring in the FBI to assist, that helps them gather additional evidence towards this investigation, which may or may not result in an immediate or near-term arrest or takedown of a threat actor group. But we do see joint collaborations, between U.S. Law enforcement and international law enforcement that are successful when enough information is gathered to take out these threat actor groups.
The FBI is who's going to work, not your local law enforcement. They're not going to. So you do need to involve them on some level, depending on what the situation is. So that's an important piece to talk about. Is removing the stigma, educating from the seat level across every department all the way up to the C-suite. This isn't every person. It's all hands on deck, because at this point the problem is so severe that everyone needs to be involved on some level and educate themselves. As we kind of look towards the future, what are some of the emerging cybersecurity threats that you're either seeing currently or that you foresee? You already mentioned AI, Artie, which I think is a really important one. And then what's going to be hitting the transportation sector over the next few years? Like, what should people be starting to prepare for or looking around for?
You want to grab that one first, Artie, and I'll tack on?
Yeah. Okay, so I don't think Fast and Furious is going to happen next week.
Well, right? No, he's 11 and 26. So yeah, so about that.
Right. So I will tell you this, right? I do think that first of all, AI, and like I said, we could probably do an entire segment on AI. There's good, bad, and ugly in AI, but you are going to see the proliferation of AI continue to evolve and be more sophisticated in support of the bad actors and to flatten the attack landscape. And what I mean by that is, instead of it just having little tiny entry points, it'll become much flatter so that everything becomes an entry point. Instead of looking for a door or a window to come in, you just walk through the wall at that point, right? So the whole castle and moat and everything like that is AI is going to kind of remove that whole scenario of defense in depth and castles and moats and and chain link fences and all that kind of stuff and concertina wire. So with just a low point of entry for AI. The second big thing I think you're going to start to see is the manipulation of IoT devices. Now, I want to make sure, and I don't want to scare anybody. Like I said, Fast and Furious is not going to happen tomorrow, but you may see the manipulation of a GPS sensor here and there, right? Somebody may somehow get into your TMS system and manipulate where a load is supposed to go or where the load is not supposed to go. So it's going to be more of a manipulation of these IoT devices, vice the flat out breaking and hacking of IoT devices. But I see those as the two big trends, probably for 2025 and into 26 near term. I think as we start to go 26, 27, and 28, I think as quantum computing becomes faster and better and cheaper and lower point of entry, we're going to see quantum computing play a huge role in being able to break normal encryption. And that's going to be a huge game changer for the bad guys when and if they can get their hands on that. And we may be looking all the way out to 2030 before, and I don't have my tinfoil hat on. I'm not a wizard. right? I did stay at a Holiday Inn Express last night, but I think that those are kind of the big trends that you will see in the next 1 to 2 and 5 years out. Ben, go ahead and jump on board.
Yeah, and I think one of the things
Tell
we're already
everybody
starting
you work
to
for a wackadoodle.
one of the things that I think that we're starting to already see is one of the use cases for AI is in deepfake, particularly, video is still possible to kind of see some tells. Deepfake voice attacks, so phishing, which is, voice-based phishing phone calls. That's kind of a weak point in transportation in particular, because we're all very used to making phone calls to book freight. We're it's not unusual to speak to someone for the first time. There's a lot of opportunity there for threat actors. And so I think as that capability matures, we're going to see an acceleration of that as a attack vector. We're already seeing it in some of the current scams that are going around out there. I don't think that's going away anytime soon. I think that's going to accelerate. And the other thing that is definitely an ongoing trend that we're going to continue to see over the next couple of years is the speed of compromise and speed of breakout. Artie, what do you got?
Yeah, so I wanted to jump on your phishing for 1 second, right? So right now it's about 10-ish% of the type of attacks, but it has the highest efficacy rating of any type of attack. It's over 90% effective, phishing is. So, and I think to Ben's point, that if that efficacy stays that high, what we're going to see is an increase in that phishing. So sorry, Ben, I just wanted to drive
that's
your point home.
I just want to break that down to simple math for everyone, right? So just make sure we're hearing that right. So if there's 100 attacks, 10 of them are a phishing attack, and 9 of those work on some level.
Yeah.
Yes.
And typically they work by way of either getting you to change the accounting information that we talked about earlier, or allowing access through remote tools, a screen share session or some remote access tool, sharing credentials, something like that, which can be a takedown very quickly. That's a bad situation. So, and to that point, I think the other acceleration we're seeing is the speed with which the compromise occurs. There used to be a fair period of time between your initial compromise and what they call breakout, or what is, lateral movement within the organization to take your final action on objective. And what we're seeing is that time is shrinking down, and you can have breakout or lateral movement in as little as 45 minutes on average now, which, if you think about trying to detect and stop something manually in that amount of time, that's a losing battle. So I think we're going to see an increase in the requirement for automated response, even at the smaller scale of businesses, in order to stay protected, because we have to understand that the speed is accelerating for the threat actors.
Right. No different.
Even
your business.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No matter what it is, whether it's illegal business or regular business, the velocity of business is ever increasing.
Absolutely, yes. I was going to say, right, even if you have a siren and a danger Will Robinson that goes off, when the attack is noticed, you have to then stop doing what you're doing and stop this. And by the time that you get into that, you can't refill your coffee along the way. You can't do any of these other things. They already have breakout. And that's why when Ben was saying, automated responses are going to be paramount, moving forward.
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, this has been very informative, very helpful. I'm excited because we're going to actually have you guys back next week, and you guys have a huge announcement that we are not going to talk about yet, but we are going to talk about next week. That we've discussed it, and to be honest, that is what prompted these 2 episodes, is what you guys have been building from a framework and infrastructure perspective, so that it is no longer just we're talking about do things, be better. These are tactical, these are step-by-step practices that organizations can take to protect themselves, to set themselves up so they are much more difficult for the bad guys to work with, and they'll go look somewhere else.
So we have a saying, right? And I think that this is fun because, we also have the Artie bingo card because I grew up in Kentucky, so I say a lot of things that people have to shake their head and scratch their head and figure out what I was talking about to start with. But when I tell them that this allows them to run faster than the slowest guy, everybody understands the bear comment at that point, right? Because you don't have to be faster than the bear. You just have to be faster than the slowest guy. And in this particular case, you don't have to be the most secure. Let that go to Morgan and Stanley and, the big banks of the world. You just have to be more secure than somebody that's not taking this stuff seriously.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, gentlemen, real quick, just for everybody that's watching, how do they get a hold of you? What's the best way to get a hold of you guys?
So you can get a hold of us through cyber@nmfta.org for email. That comes right to our team. We're both on LinkedIn. We're all over LinkedIn. We also have a lot of resources on our website, nmfta.org/cybersecurity. We put a lot of white papers and research and guidance and everything up there.
Fantastic. And then individually, so look for Ben Wilkens and Artie. Like I said, look for them on LinkedIn. Guys, thank you so much. We're going to be back next week with you. We're going to be talking about, again, your big announcement, talk about some frameworks, talk about some of the research-based, things you guys have done and kind of what that's yielded as far as from a knowledge perspective and then what people can do with that. So once again, gentlemen, thank you so much for your time today, and we'll see you all next week on Driving Forward.
Thank you.